Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be here, and it's nice to be on stage rather than sitting down. I've had a long experience in relationship with TSMS Noida, but the entire group and Uttara ma'am. So just taking the chance to tell you what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about Avaz, what we thought we wanted to do, what we ended up doing, and also something that we realized was missing during the pandemic. But before I begin, I want you to do one thing, and we're going to circle back to it in a bit, right? I want you to think about one person who is in the audience that you go to for help or is essentially teaching you in school. So let's just take 10 seconds and look at someone who teaches you or helps you at school. Interesting, interesting. I could see a couple of interesting things over there. And we'll come back to it in a second, right? So it's called the what, how, why, and the missing piece. For you to understand the missing piece, it's important for us to understand the story. So Avaz started quite like with the idea of this speech around pushing the boundaries of learning. We wanted to ask this fundamental question that what kind of learning is valued and what kind of learning is important. We wanted to push the idea that learning has to and can go beyond things like math, science, social science, all of these things that we studied. And that's why we started off Avaz to provide access and support to all students in figuring out the best way that they have to express themselves. This could end up looking like debate. This could be in the form of theater. This could be in the form of public speaking. So our idea was to create this space. At Avaz, we have a vision for expanding education beyond the classroom. Our commitment to holistic skill development for students lays out the path for us to shape young minds one at a time. The how. So how did we do this? And I'm not going to go into numbers. We already had someone talk about how many students we have reached. But what we really value is how we have been able to create this space. So looking at what we have been able to do. Over time, we have added topics. We started off with public speaking, and over time, we have added topics like critical thinking, public speaking, and climate justice. Climate is something that's obviously very important because that's literally what's happening outside our classrooms right now. Across all of this, our aim remained the same: to rethink and reimagine what importance is assigned to different kinds of learning. Over a span of almost a decade, Avaz would start with a team of 2 teachers, the other teachers sitting in the audience. We managed to reach out to multiple students across different cities in India, but also outside India. So we felt really nice about ourselves. We had students learning debate, we had students doing well in debate, we had students learning theater, doing well in theater, we had students going to great universities after working with us, and we thought we had everything sorted. However, we had a piece missing. So we talked about the why also, but I'm just going to jump over that, is for almost 6 years, we thought we had understood the keys. We knew exactly what we wanted to do. We knew exactly all the parts. But what was missing and what we took for assumption, we almost assumed that obviously the answer to this is just one, is who should be doing the teaching? Who is responsible for people learning? We generally always assumed that there's just one answer to it, which are the people sitting in front, right? It's just the teachers. However, we were in for a rude shock during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we found out that even though schools were doing their best, schools and teachers were going online, classes were happening online, students were learning online, we saw a drastic increase in student isolation. We saw a drastic decrease in student mental health. And then we realized that what's important is not just having one person or not just having a small group of people, but what's important is having your community, having your peers. And hence, when I started off, I asked you the question, look to someone who helps you or look to someone who teaches you. What was really nice to see is that I saw some students look towards teachers, but I also saw some students just look to each other and smile. Right? Because we know that how important community is. Learning literally went beyond classrooms during the pandemic. No one was in school. Everyone was behind screen. Everyone was behind a black box. We didn't know who was there, who wasn't there. And this is when we started asking ourselves the question of finding that peace. So what did we do after that? This led us to rethink the learning process. Who is responsible for supporting and mentoring students? Is it just teachers or someone else as well? We began exploring the role of communities and peer communities in learning. In a large-scale study that we did, so we worked with around 20,000 students, where we tried to understand the impact that student connections and student networks have on their well-being and also their learning. Unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, we saw that students with low connectivity struggle significantly more than those who are more connected. We saw them struggle with bullying. We saw them struggle with their own self-perception. We saw them struggle with learning. Conversely, we saw students who were connected and felt like they had a community do much better. We saw them have increased excitement, wanting to come to school, wanting to participate. All of this told us that the one thing that we have been forgetting is the who. Who we think is in charge of teaching and who we think is in charge of learning is really important. So I'm going to show you this, right? Before I go on, I'm going to take a question because I can do that now, is what does this look like? Anyone in the audience, what does this look like? Yeah. Sorry? Broken screen, great. I can see with all the pixels. What else? It looks like a mind map. That's really interesting. Let's take one more. Someone from here. What does it look like? Someone said the right thing, so you can repeat it again. Network. This is a classroom and a classroom full of students, quite like everyone who's sitting here. I want to show you what happens and why it's important for us to think and use networks. Let's look at this video, right? What we are seeing in life is that when you start pulling these people who are connected, when you start working with people who are connected, they're not just having an impact on themselves. That impact is not being contained just to those people, but is being expanded. Every single time, this network is so magical. So what it does and what it means is that when we have to teach, and when we have to teach subjects, traditional academic subjects or subjects beyond that also, it's important to build these networks. Because if you want to support students and if you want to support your peers, it's important to see who is in your network. I want you to look to your left and right, and this is a natural selection. I can see someone doing it, that's great. The people who are sitting next to you will have as much of an impact on your future as will the teachers who are sitting in the front. These people will decide where you go, what you do, how you do it. It's important for us, again, to be mindful of networks, which brings us to the question of what did we learn? So what do we do with this jigsaw piece, right? We found out that networks are essential. We found out that networks are important. One of the key issues and key problems around networks is everyone takes networks for granted. Everyone thinks that networks are organic. What do I mean by when I say networks are organic? We just believe that people will obviously find people. Students will find friends, people will find peers, and everyone will, as people say, find their space in school, find their space outside school. This isn't true. The same way that you wouldn't expect someone to just naturally learn math or naturally learn a sport, you cannot expect these networks to naturally develop. What needs to be done is we need to think about these networks explicitly. We need to think about these networks as something that we need to foster and build in classrooms. As we're empowering communities and as we are thinking of ideas and learning inside classrooms and outside classrooms, it's really important for us to see who we are doing it with. As the world is changing, one thing that doesn't make sense anymore is to train students for jobs of today, because those jobs are gone. When all of you go out, finish your graduation, and start working, most of you are going to be working in jobs that either don't exist right now or are just coming up. So the solution then is not to train you specifically for a job, but is to train you with skills. And those skills should then translate into the jobs that might develop. The important thing to be cognizant of is that when we are teaching this skill, or when we are teaching you about these activities and these skills, it's important for us to build community, to get people to work together. Because the role of the teacher is already very difficult, but to assume that the teacher can do everything and be there for everyone at all points of time is something that's very, very difficult. As someone who's taught for the last decade, I know that it's practically impossible. So what we need is we need the people around you. We need the people who are sitting next to you, the people who are sitting behind you to step up. As for students, it's important to understand the connections that you have, build those connections, and also be cognizant of the fact of who those people are in your connections. If we go back to the map, you can see that every small movement pulls the entire network. It's not just one person that's moving. So if we want to make change, and if we want to put in skills that we are still thinking about, it's important that we start looking at classrooms and schools and all of us as positions in this network. And with that, thank you so much. It was great talking to all of you.